There's a photograph that my mother still keeps in her kitchen in an old wooden frame. It captures a moment from a dinner years ago, the last dinner I had with my family before I left Lisbon. I remember that night in far more vivid color than that faded photograph. The room, warm, humid, smelling of garlic, grilled sardines, wine. My parents' apartment perched on the slope of Alfama, smoke floating through the window, the tram cars rattling by below. I was 21 and full of frantic hope, like every young person who doesn't know any better. That night the sky outside was bruised purple. My father, silver-haired and upright, passed around the bacalao, his lips slightly shaking as always when he was annoyed, but holding back. My mother, her hands graceful and hard from years in the kitchen, filled everyone's glasses, her smile brittle, as if at any moment it might shatter and cut us all. Manuel, my older brother, pulled at his collar, already sweating from the wine and the anticipation. He looked at me in that way he did, half older brother, half interrogator. My sister, Teresa, circled the table with her phone, taking photos, rolling her eyes. The rest of the family, uncles, aunts, cousins, too close and too nosy for my comfort, were already gathered like a gallery for my defeat. I knew what was coming, but I braced anyway. A hush settled as plates cleared, and Manuel leaned in, his voice lowered, but not so much as to be missed by anyone. "So, Andre," he said, tapping his fork on my plate, "is it true then? You're really going to be a starving artist?" Sniggers followed. Teresa made an overblown gesture with her hands, an imaginary paintbrush dripping in invisible color. My Uncle Jaime gave a snort that rattled his mustache. "Imagine that! A painter!" my Aunt Aurora exclaimed. Lisbon is full of walls already marked up by these dreamers. And how do they eat? Not with paint, I think. Laughter around the table echoed off the tile. I swallowed, feeling every eye like a small knife. My father cleared his throat in a way that said he'd tried and failed to prevent this. Still, he met my eyes. "It's not too late," he said quietly. "You could join Manol in the store, learn a trade. There is dignity in honest work." "Yes," Jaime added. "Art is for children. Adults have mouths to feed. Who will pay you to scribble?" My hands, always stained with some trace of charcoal or oil, curled beneath the table. I'd heard versions of these speeches so many times they had worn grooves in my heart. "Not all artists starve," I said, my voice shaking, trying to sound reasonable, not angry. "There are galleries, people who invest. I want to try." Teresa burst out laughing again. "Galleries, please. You think the galleries of Baisha are waiting for Andre Santos, and then what? Paint lilies and charge rent?" That was the moment humiliation flushed over my skin. I could feel the sting in my cheeks, the clench behind my eyes. Not for the first time, I wanted to run, but I stayed. "I'm not asking for support," I said, sounding steadier than I felt, "just that you let me try." My father poured more wine, his jaw set. My mother hovered nearby, silent as always, mixing pride with worry. There was nothing left to say. The food grew cold on my plate. After dinner, I stood on the balcony and watched the city. The hills of Lisbon rolled out, orange rooftops glowing in the late light, the Tagus River gleaming in the distance. I heard my parents murmuring, the old apartment creaking, the footsteps of my family receding. I remember standing there, making a private promise to myself. I would be patient, even if the world around me wasn't, and I would not, ever again, let anyone talk me out of the dreams that visited me when I was alone at night. I left for Paris the next morning. My father's last words simply, "Don't lose yourself, Andre." For years I wore those words in my chest like a stone. Paris in winter is not romantic the way the movies say. The cold was a living thing that crawled under my coat, under my skin. I rented a room so small I could stretch out my arms and nearly touch both walls. I worked in a bistro, washed dishes, delivered newspapers, sometimes skipped dinner. My mornings were spent in a drafty attic with cracked windows and walls the faded yellow of old postcards. I painted until my hands ached. Humiliation became more ghostly, changing from the sharp sting of my family's laughter to the slow grind of indifference in a city full of dreamers. No one mocked me in Paris. They simply didn't notice me. The great art world went on its way, swirling above me like a party through a thick pane of glass. I would wait in gallery lobbies, staring at canvases far more abstract or more brilliant than mine, hoping one day to show someone, anyone, my work. In those years, patience was my only weapon. I learned to let things pass over me, the dismissive glances, the rejections, the long silences between letters home. I wrote to my mother every month. Sometimes she replied with recipes or brief notes that said, "We are fine." Sometimes not at all. My first real break came quietly. 5 years after I left, I was 18 euros from eviction, standing on a rainy street with a folder full of sketches, when an old woman stopped to look. She wore a scarf like a splash of green paint, and her accent was pure Lisbon. "You're from Portugal, aren't you?" she said. It was the first time in years anyone had recognized me for something other than just a struggling artist. I nodded, and we talked about Alfama, about the way light shifts across the river in the late afternoon, about Saudade. I showed her my portfolio, embarrassed at its roughness, but she smiled. "My grandson owns a small gallery," she said. "He is curious about new painters. Come tomorrow, bring your work." Her grandson, Pierre, was no kingmaker, but he gave me a corner near the bathroom in his tiny gallery. I displayed 5 canvases, moody cityscapes. The light of Lisbon dancing over rooftops at dusk, the shadowed streets of Paris at dawn. The first month, 2 paintings sold. The second month, a local magazine wrote a short review. I was bewildered, shocked almost, by the sense that suddenly my vision was visible to someone else. It was not a miracle. There were no lines of buyers, no sudden windfall, only a few more paintings sold, enough to pay for bread and a warmer coat. Year by year, the grind softened just slightly. I became known, a little. I was still just another painter among hundreds, thousands, but I had gallery shows, small features in magazines. I started to believe patience was bearing fruit. And then, one humid summer morning, my phone rang. It was an invitation to display my work as part of a group show at a gallery back in Lisbon. I felt a hollow in my chest. Home. After 8 years, the idea of returning was terrifying, not because of Lisbon itself, but because the wounds from that last dinner had never really closed. The first scent as I returned was always the same: salt and grilled fish, laurel and garlic, mingled with the briny breath of the Atlantic. The city looked smaller than I remembered, the streets familiar, yet gently changed. I walked the narrow passages of Alfama, tripping over uneven stones, sliding past old women with long memories. People glanced at me with indifference, but somehow I felt their eyes linger, the way one notices someone who might matter just a little. On the day of the exhibition, the gallery was bright, whitewashed, with tall windows framing the city's descending hills. My paintings, 8 of them, hung in a row. The largest showed Alfama at sunset, rooftops layered like scales, the river spilling gold. I stood awkwardly against the wall, heart pounding as visitors filtered in. I recognized no one at first, strangers murmuring about color, brushstroke, atmosphere. Then I saw Manuel and Teresa at the door. Flanked by our parents, older, smaller than I remembered. My mother's mouth trembled as she entered, eyes flicking, not quite meeting mine. My father walked slower, cane in hand. Manuel wore his best suit, stiff as ever, as if bracing for bad news. Teresa, still with her phone, surveyed the room with a skeptical air. They hesitated at the entrance, heads together, whispering as they looked at the paintings. My Uncle Jaime wandered in after them, laughing at some half-heard joke. For a heartbeat, I wished I weren't there, wished instead to skip straight to some bland aftermath, where the shame of that old dinner didn't echo through my bones. But the world doesn't work that way. The gallery director, a lively Frenchwoman named Sabine, approached my family. She'd heard a little of my story, and she was more than happy to turn their attention my way. "Come, come! Are you the family of Andre Santos?" she said, clapping her hands. "His paintings are the highlight tonight. Sold already, 3 of them. People love his Lisbon, yes?" She turned, finding me by the far window. Sabine waved them forward, and suddenly all eyes were on me again, not with derision, not with the mocking laughter of that dinner, but in silent assessment. Manuel was the first to speak. He looked at the paintings, then at me, as if assessing an entirely new person. This is your work?" he asked, voice oddly small. The proof was right there. My name on the wall, in crisp black letters. Andre Santos, Saudade y Luz. I nodded. "It is," I said. People drifted around us. A couple stood admiring the large Alfama painting, murmuring in French. One of them checked a brochure, marked with a red dot. Sold. Teresa stepped forward, her phone lowered for once, studying the colors, deep crimsons and smoky gray.